am a woman who is 70 years old, and I grew up in a very small town in Colorado. At that time, there was no place anyone could call or go if they became pregnant. And we didn't have clinics like we had now. And what happened during that time in 1970s and late 60s is girls got pregnant. And in a small town where I lived, if a girl got pregnant, they were talked about, gossiped about, and ostracized. And so there was no Planned Parenthood. And at that time, we were fighting for the passage of Roe versus Wade, working really hard through the women's lib movement to be able to get our point across and finally have that act. And we have had that right to choose ever since. But unfortunately, let me give you a little background of my community because I think it's really important. I had several friends that got pregnant. My class existed of 52 children, kids, young adults. And when we were in high school, there were several girls that got pregnant, lower classmates, my classmates in my class, as well as older classmates. One of my classmates' sister got pregnant, and she was in with a Catholic family, so she had no choice but to get married. And she was pregnant during her senior year. She was made by her parents and by her religion to have this baby. So they had a Catholic wedding I attended. She was not allowed to wear white. She wore blue and a nice gown, but it was knee length. When she walked down the aisle, the congregation was somber. There were no smiling faces. She wasn't smiling either. It was so sad. And that made me angry. And I also felt like this was like putting a scarlet letter on her and making her show, oh, how bad I am. She got married, they had the baby, and after she turned 21, they divorced. It affected her life and has affected her life for all the time she's been on this earth. And at that point, it wasn't acceptable to be pregnant and go to school. So she couldn't go to school. She probably finished her degree or high school diploma via GED or something like that. I do not know because she never returned. I had two other friends that went to convent and lived in a convent with the nuns. And when it came time to deliver, they didn't see their babies, they didn't hold their babies, and they were not, at that time, they used to put women out to sleep to have their babies. It was a medical procedure, so antiquated from what we do today. So they had these babies. They didn't know if they were girls or boys, and they gave them up for adoption. Both of those girls didn't return to my school either. I have no idea how they got their degree, but they did, and they've gone on to be successful women, but also had this feeling that, I had to give my baby away. Can you imagine, you know, having the baby and then just having to give it up because your parents said, you can't keep this baby. You have to give this baby up. And then there's other girls from not just in my classroom and in my school, but that I've met throughout my life that have told me about stories of friends that they knew or that they personally went to Mexico because it wasn't legal. You couldn't find anybody in America to do an abortion unless it was a back alley doctor, and some of those weren't very good either. So they went to Mexico and had their babies. One was never able to have a baby again. One actually perished and bled out and passed away. And these sounds like really awful stories. They are awful stories. And we fought hard to pass Roe versus Wade. And we worked so hard. And now it's like 40 plus years later, we're having to do this again. The government needs to stay out of our rights to do what we want and our rights to choose. Back in the 1600s, they were talking about, why do we have this in England? A lot of our forefathers and our ancestors came from there. And so we came to America for our right to be free. And here we are again. And it should be a woman's right to choose if she even is religious or not. Not everybody believes in God. And we have the right to not be made to go to church. It's so different back when our parents and their parents immigrated from Europe. They wanted to keep the distance from religion and the government. And we've been successful to do it. But as we've gotten more politics into our rights, this is not right. And think about it. It's all about women that they're choosing to target on this. What about men? If we're going to get religion in here, then, if the morning after pill is not available, then, next it's going to be condoms. Condoms won't be able to be used because what are we going to do? Just have babies? All these babies? Because politics has gotten involved and said, hey, men, you can't use a condom and you can't get a vasectomy. Let's talk about men for a minute. No men are being told that they have to have a vasectomy because they happen to get a girl pregnant. I mean, these are questions that need to be talked about. And if your child comes home, my lovely granddaughter, who is now 12 years old, going to be 12 years old, she's going to grow up, if we continue the way we are right now, and she's going to grow up and she's going to have the same situation that I was in the 70s. Why are we going backwards? This is wrong. This is wrong. We need to keep religion out of a woman's right to choose. We must go forward. We must go higher. We must get beyond allowing a man who has been convicted of sexual abuse of women in several cases. And now we also have him a felony charge. How can anybody in their right mind believe that this guy is going to take us to a better place? In his project 2025, it's real. It's not a hoax. My daughter said to me, it's a hoax, right, Mom? Yeah, well, was January 6th a hoax? No. And we need to look at the fact that we are all Americans. Doesn't matter what party. Doesn't matter if you have a party. You have the right to vote. If you don't vote, you don't get to say anything later, because your right to vote is saying that I'm American and this is the way I want to vote. But in my right mind, I can't even consider thinking I would elect someone who is going to take my rights away from me, and it's going to pass. Read it. It's in Project 2025. And the heritage movement and all the cronies he has lined up behind him. The only way we're going to move forward and go higher is to give Kamala Harris and Tim Walz our vote. When we get to vote, and it's 60 days from now, this is September 6th, and we have 2 months. It's not a very long time. I hope this has helped you make a choice. I'm doing all I can to say, I don't want to look back. I don't want to have my children, my children's children, have to go through what I went through and my friends went through back in the 60s and the 70s. And before that too. People had this done in the 50s. They just didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about stuff like that. Again, I reiterate, when it comes to vote first. After you vote, you can say all you want for whoever wins and what happens. If you don't vote, you don't get that choice. And so let's go forward. Let's look up. Let's not go back, and vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It's the best thing you can do to save our country. Thank you.